Thank you for being a part of Our Voice Washington. Your voice alone or my voice alone is just one voice. But when we collectively come together and we raise one voice, it is our voice that will make the difference here in Washington State. We have an upcoming legislative session that starts January 12th, and we have got to get ready to engage as the citizenry. Now, when I look through all these bills, I'm going to talk about three of them today that have to do with immigration. Now, how I approach these is I go to leg.wa.gov. I click on bills right here. You can follow along over on the side. And what I do is I look up bills by topic. So this topic is going to be immigration. I'm going to talk about three bills specifically that have to do with immigration that I think it is very important that we as the citizenry discuss. The first bill that I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to summarize it pretty much, but you can go and read the entire bill. This is House Bill 1482. And this is sponsored by all Democrats. And I'm just going to kind of read, I'm going to highlight just a couple of things and maybe give some comment on it. This is an act relating to assuring equity in health care coverage. Now, what do they mean by that? Let's find out. In Section 1, this is what it says. Washington is home to more than 1 million immigrants who strengthen the state's economy, attend school, work, and pay taxes, but are structurally excluded from the social safety net. That's what it says. You fill in your own blanks. Basically, what they're saying is, look, there's illegal immigrants all over our state. They're paying taxes, which isn't entirely true. However, they can't pay taxes. They don't have a social security number and they're not citizens. Section B says this: uninsured individuals are far more likely to be in poor health and more likely to delay or forego needed health care services. They don't have access to health care because they're not citizens. Washington has a long history of working toward equity in immigrant health care coverage. Okay. I'm going to try and not give a lot of comment. I'm just going to try and read it and let the bill itself bounce off of your brain and your emotions and your understanding and leave my thoughts out of it. Federal law unjustly excludes certain categories of immigrants from receiving affordable health care. Immigrants are disproportionately uninsured and at a risk for poor health outcomes. In 2021, undocumented immigrants had an uninsured rate 6 times of that of United States citizens. I have to comment on this. They may have lower health care because they're not United States citizens. And it says it right here in Section C, or in C, Section 1. We're going to go to Section 2, and I'm going to read a couple of these lines here. It says, the authority shall manage its application and renewal procedures to maximize enrollment of eligible individuals, including assuring a seamless transition for individuals losing eligibility for other coverage, including children, pregnancy and postpartum, and emergency coverage. This section has to do with making sure the administration has covered all its bases, and this bill is administered perfectly. Section 2(5)(a) says this: the authority shall establish the Community Accountability Committee for Apple Health Expansion. They're creating an entire healthcare network for immigrants. The next section says this: the committee shall consist of at least 5 and no more than 9 geographically diverse members. In other words, what they're saying is the Immigrant Healthcare Committee is going to be made of illegal immigrants. The Democrats never fail. Never fail. Section D says this, or Part D of Section 2 says this: the committee shall submit a report to the appropriate committees of the legislation by July 1st, 2026, and every 2 years following. Part 6 says the authority may contract with consultants and partner with other agencies as needed to develop these reports. I'm going to skip over to Section 4. This is what it says. they're amending certain laws in Section 4. Section 4 is basically RCW 4371.020 are amended to read as follows. And this is what it says. The exchange shall have a governing board consisting of persons with expertise in Washington healthcare system and private and public healthcare coverage. The membership of the board shall be appointed as follows. Listen, each of the two caucuses in both the House and the Senate shall submit to the governor a list of 5 nominees. The nominations from the largest caucus in the House of the Representatives must include at least 1 employee benefit specialist, 1 health economist, 1 representative of health consumer advocates, at least 1 representative of small businesses. The remaining nominees must have demonstrated and acknowledged expertise in at least one of the following areas: individual health care coverage, small employer health care coverage, health benefit plan administration, healthcare finance, economics, articular science, administering a public or private healthcare system. The governor shall appoint 2 members from each list submitted by the caucus under. Now, when they reference the largest caucus, they're saying the Democrat Party in Washington state. And then the governor gets to appoint his own. The governor shall appoint a ninth. Now listen, this is very important to understand. The governor shall appoint a 9th member to serve as chair. The chair may not be an employee of the state or its political subdivisions. The chair shall serve as a non-voting member except in the case of a tie. So the governor is appointing the chair of this committee. The following members shall serve as non-voting ex officio members of the board: the insurance commissioner or his or her designee, the administrator of healthcare authority. Initial members of the board shall serve staggering terms not to exceed 4 years. A member of the board whose term is expired or otherwise leaves the board shall be replaced by a gubernatorial appointment. The governor will appoint. No board member may be appointed if his or her participation in the decisions of the board could benefit his or her own financial interests or the interests of another board member. Okay, yeah, right. Members of the board must be reimbursed for their travel expenses. Where are they going? So what you see here is they are stacking this committee. In other words, what they're doing is they're getting a bunch of ideologues together to ensure that immigrants get the best health care Washington state has to offer. They don't need to be citizenry. They don't have to be members of the United States. They can just cross over the border illegally, and yet we are going to take care of it. And when I say we, I mean you and I as the taxpayers. So you can see their mission. Here's the problem. When you have a bunch of ideologues, you don't operate in reality. So they're going to get a committee of ideologues together and a bunch of non-government organizations, and they are going to funnel this thing, and they are going to make a lot of money, and they're going to keep their voters happy. Next bill I want to talk about is House Bill 2105, and I made a short video about this a little bit earlier, but we need to make sure that we keep our eyes on this. House Bill 2105. This is an act relating to protecting immigrant workers. Okay, I'm just going to read some notes, and I'm going to try not to comment on it. All right. This legislature finds that immigrant workers contribute to Washington State's strong economy, according to research from the Immigration Research Initiative. Immigrants account for 15% of the population in Washington State. The legislator finds that civil immigration enforcement throughout workplace raids conducted by federal government is disruptive to families and communities, reduces safety, and is ineffective at deterring illegal conduct by employers or raising standards for workers. The federal enforcement of immigration is not about the employers or raising standard for workers. It is about getting people who are illegal out of the country. The legislator finds that employers could benefit from clarity about their rights and responsibilities when engaging with federal agencies that conduct Form I-9 audits. The legislator seeks to provide resources and support to employers about their rights and the rights of their workers. In other words, they're going to make a whole bunch of new rights and a whole bunch of new laws to get the workers or to get the employers to be snitches for them. Part 4 of Section 1 says this: the legislator finds that protecting Washingtonians, abiding by state laws, and keeping families together is urgent statewide priority. The next part says this: the legislator therefore intends to require Washington employers to provide notice to workers in the event of a Form I-9 audit and provide additional protections and support for workers and employers. In other words, they are going to do everything they can to stand in the way of federal immigration policies. Section 3 says this: by July 1st, 2026, all employers must post a notice about workers' right under this act and keep it posted in a conspicuous place where other required employment posters are posted. The Attorney General shall create a poster that will include space in which an employer must provide information on where they will post notices required under this act. The Attorney General shall make the poster available on its website and make the poster available in all other formats. In other words, this poster will be next to all the L&I posters and workers' rights posters, and you can write the date of the audit or the immigration raid right there on the poster. Section 3, Part 2 says an employer must, within 72 hours of receiving notification from a federal agency of any inspections of I-9 forms or worker records, provide a notice to each worker and the worker's authorized representative. An employer must provide notice of the upcoming inspection by, and they're going to list it now, posting a notice in a conspicuous and accessible location in each of the 5 most widely used non-English languages in the state. Are you listening to this? The name of the federal agency which will be conducting the inspections of the I-9 forms, the date that the employer received the notice of this inspection, and the nature of the inspection to the extent known to the employer. In other words, you are narking, you are broadcasting that this inspection is going to take place. You have to tell your workers. They're asking them to break federal law. Section 4 says this: employers are not required by law to perform Form I-90 self-audits. Any form of I-9 self-audit must comply with all applicable federal, state, and local anti-discrimination and anti-retaliation laws. Okay, I can't even comment. Comment on it yourself. On or before July 1st, 2026, the Attorney General shall issue guidance clarifying employers' rights to restrict access to non-public areas and places of labor. The guidance shall be available to the Attorney General's website so that it is accessible to the employer. The Attorney General shall make the guidance available in English and in each of the 5 most commonly used non-English languages in the state. Basically, what the Attorney General is doing is empowering all employers who may have illegal immigrants working for them to become the narcs and to become the eyes and ears to deter them and make sure that they don't have to comply with federal customs and immigration policies. And in fact, the employers are working for the ideologues that are protecting these sanctuary policies and protecting illegal immigrants. Okay, go and read the rest of that bill on your own. The final bill is a good bill, and this is Senate Bill 5002, and this is by Republicans. Okay, this was introduced last year at last session, and it couldn't get any traction, but we're hoping we can get traction on this bill right now. Senate Bill 5002. It's an act relating to federal immigration enforcement. And you have to understand this. This bill right here is basically going to war against the kind of bills that I just read. So this is put forward by Republicans to combat the legislation like that I just read. This is what it says. Section 1, and listen to the way they word it. It's pretty strategic. Section 1, legislative fines and intents. The legislator recognizes that state policy interest in protecting immigrant communities and cooperating and assisting the federal government in the enforcement of federal immigration laws within this state. The legislator finds that immigration communities are often the most victimized by illegal immigration and that criminal organizations involved in illegal immigration disproportionately target immigrant communities with criminal activity and flagrant abuses of human rights. Okay, so basically what they're saying is, look, the legal immigrants, the citizens, those who are here legally, who have immigrated and become citizens, are actually some of the biggest victims of illegal immigration. And you know what? They're right. The legislator intends to respect and protect the health, safety, and dignity of all immigrant communities by establishing a statewide policy that encourages a collaborative partnership with the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement to address and prevent criminal, illegal immigration activities and the criminal organizations that facilitate illegal immigration-related crimes. And you can read through this. I'm going to read Section 3 of this bill. It says, a state entity, law enforcement agency, or local government entity may not adopt or have in effect a sanctuary policy. And this is where this bill is going to get shot down, because we know Democrats love sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants, for gender-affirming care, and all those different things. Section 4 says this: a law enforcement agency shall use best efforts to support the enforcement of federal immigration law. This subsection applies to an official, representative, agent, or employee of the entity in agency only when he or she is acting within the scope of his or her official duties or within the scope of his or her employment. Okay, this bill is a very good bill that I just read, and it's really hard to get a very good, common sense, America, Washington first, low-cost bill through the legislator. In fact, it's almost impossible unless you have a Democrat co-sponsor. However, we the people need to make some noise. What has been happening with this Nick Shirley video and this Minnesota fraud exposure is the Democrats are shaking in their boots because they know the citizens have the power to expose them. And this is our opportunity as the citizenry to expose horrible, bad, lefty, America last, Washington last, very expensive policies and legislative, but if we don't engage and we don't gear up for the fight, then nothing is going to happen. Remember, this isn't about one voice or two voices. This is about the collective, our voice, Washington. We can make a difference. Let's gear up. Let's get ready for the fight. And let's take this legislative battle all the way to the end. Remember, our voice is the voice that's going to make a difference.